Thank you, Diana. I'm Marva Johnson, and on behalf of Charter Communications, the parent company of Spectrum's portfolio of products and services, I'd like to thank you all for joining us online for this very important roundtable conversation and celebration of Women's History Month. Today, I am pleased to be in the excellent company of three very distinguished female leaders for a candid conversation on the importance of diversity and inclusion in North Carolina's workforce, their perspectives on leadership, and their insights on how to influence in a historically male-dominated space. We know that diversity matters, and research makes it very clear that promoting diversity and inclusion in the workforce is more than the right thing to do socially, it is the right thing to do financially. A 2016 McKinsey & Company study found that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity are 15% more likely to have financial returns above the national industry means, while companies in the bottom quartile are statistically less likely to achieve above average financial returns. As consumer needs rapidly evolve, the cable, telecommunications, and technology industries rely on innovation to drive business results, and corollarily, diverse workforces boost creativity and innovation. From coast to coast, Charter is committed to building stronger connections every day, providing superior products and services to our customers, and investing in the infrastructure, technology, and the people powering the future. As Charter is committed to embracing diversity and inclusion in every aspect of our business, we prioritize attracting, developing, and retaining the best talent from among the broadest range of people. Women make up 32% of Charter's workforce of more than 95,000 employees across 41 states in our nation. We are proud to offer all of our employees access to the resources they need to succeed, including raising our company-wide minimum wage to $20 an hour by the year 2020, and ensuring that all of our employees have access to key skill-building, networking, and mentorship opportunities. Every day, women at Charter are leading teams, making critical business decisions, and driving innovation to ensure that our customers receive information and entertainment that they need and want in a hyper-connected world. In fact, across the country, our 41 states are divided into 11 field operations regions. 2 of those regions are led by women, and right here in the Carolinas, we are fortunate to have as the regional vice president for field operations, Ms. Shannon Atkinson, who leads our technical operations covering North Carolina, South Carolina, and portions of Virginia and Maryland, with over 2.7 million customers and 3,500 fulfillment, maintenance, and construction employees. As we gather here today, on the last day of Women's History Month, to celebrate and honor female leaders, I am reminded of the unique paths we have each made towards the journey for leadership and professional success. WICT has played a vital role in my own story, and as a people leader, I am proud to see those people on my team as they grow within our organization. I'd like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to the dedicated volunteers of the WICT-Carolinas who invited me to lead today's conversation. I'm very honored. And those, again, very dedicated WICT-Carolinas volunteers were also the group that organized this wonderful event for us here today. I am now pleased to introduce our distinguished panel of roundtable speakers. A Mount Airy, North Carolina native, Sarah Stevens is a private practice attorney. She represents Surry and Wilkes County in North Carolina in the North Carolina General Assembly, where she has been a state representative since 2009. During her tenure in the North Carolina General Assembly, Representative Stevens has chaired a number of committees and sponsored legislation for the betterment of her district and North Carolinians. A dedicated advocate for children, Representative Stevens has worked passionately to reform the child welfare system in North Carolina and to give a voice to those who cannot speak for themselves. In 2017, members of the General Assembly voted for her as the Speaker pro tempore of the House, and she holds this title today. Speaker pro tempore Stevens, thank you for joining us here today. Now in her second term as mayor of the largest city in the state, Mayor Lyles became the first Black mayor, the first Black female mayor for Charlotte in 2018. Before seeking elected office, Mayor Lyles was a dedicated city employee, and from 2013 to 2017, she served 2 terms on the Charlotte City Council, including 2 terms as Mayor Pro Tem. Finally, I am pleased to introduce our current WICT Global Board Chair and industry leader and North Carolinian, Mrs. Sandy Howe. Sandy currently serves as an independent director and chair of a special committee on the board of directors for Minim, a technology company focused on innovative internet access products. In addition, she is a founder and investor of the minority-owned Coravant, a technology investment management and value-added reseller company servicing the telecom industry. Sandy is on the board of directors for the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, the Internet and Television Association, the board of the Society of Cable Telecommunications Engineers Foundation, and she's serving in the investment committee and is the chair of the Women in Cable Telecommunications Global Board. Speaker Pro Tem Stevens, Mayor Lyles, and Mrs. Sandy Howe, thank you all for joining Charter and for joining the WICT-Carolinas for today's incredible discussion. Empowering women from all backgrounds to succeed is what we're focused on here today. And I'm very grateful to have your collective voices and perspective on this very important topic. Sitting here with you all today, each of us is coming from a different background with a different perspective. Yet one common thread is our political, well, actually just our positioning as leaders in a traditionally male-dominated world. Could you tell us a little bit about what your journey has been like and what challenges you've had to face along the way? I would love to start with maybe you, Mayor Lyles, having been the first African-American female for the largest city in the state of North Carolina.
Well, thank you so much, Marva, for the question. And thanks to Charter for having us on this panel. I think it's an important time for this conversation about women, especially as COVID had happened. But you asked me about my journey. So I grew up with 5 brothers. So I think that I was pretty gender qualified. I learned to fight very, very early. But I remember an experience I had as a young woman watching a governmental meeting, and there was a discussion about blue collar versus pink collar. Now, that takes you back a while, but that was at the time how women's jobs were primarily defined, meaning that you were going to be a secretary at the time or a teacher. And then blue collar was the workers that were primarily men. And I remember a woman, a legislative woman, she was on the city council here in Charlotte, and she said, I want to know if we're paying people the same. Does the blue collar and the pink collar pay equity exist? And that left an impression with me that has lasted for a long time. So I believe that we're an important part of our journey in this country, in our state, in our city, our region, around the idea of How do we recognize that when you exclude any gender from the talent base, that you're losing the perspective that they can bring? You know, when you think about what ideas have been thought about but not acted on just because you were ignored as a woman or as a person of color, then just that's a loss to the entire foundation of our economy. So my journey has always been to think about this in an inclusive way for women especially, people of color especially, because we have ideas and things that can make a difference in a community, whether it's just as simple as contributing to your neighborhood or whether or not it's leading this country as vice president. I just think that there's a reason that women are stepping up now.
I loved getting to hear that. I also loved that you put so much emphasis on measuring and on having tangible goals and objectives in everything that you do, not just from your work in establishing the audit programs for the city, but also as we look objectively at equity in the workplace. So thank you, Mayor Lyles, for sharing that. And by the way, I have 3 brothers and no sisters, and I tell people I was raised by wolves because I love to fight for them too. Speaker Pro Tem, we would love to hear your perspective as well. I mean, our legislature has not been really, female oriented for some time. So I'd love to hear about your journey and your challenges.
Well, thank you so much. I will tell you that, again, we'll start with family background. I am number 5 of 7 children, and all relatively close in age. There were 5 girls and 2 boys. And I have to laugh because I was raised by a chauvinistic father who believed that men could do anything, and as women, go do whatever you want, which was nice because we could pursue anything that we wanted. So my oldest sister is also an attorney. I'm an attorney. We both came into practice in the 1980s when it was predominantly a male dominated area. I have another sister who's a business owner, and one sister who was a CPA and an internal auditor for a bank, and then now currently works for the city of Charlotte. I have another sister who did a lot of different things, including run my law office for quite a period of time. So we had a mother who said, yes, you can do anything you want. Now she keeps telling me sometimes I can't do things. And I love it when somebody tells me I can't do things because I will go do it. Now, getting over into politics, I did not really have a desire or aspiration to go into politics. I received a call one day that said, we believe you believe there. And I was taking 5 or 6 weeks to decide. And my husband, bless his heart, the most supportive man you'll ever meet. We went to an event and they said, we want to introduce you to the next candidate for House. And he said, I guess you're running. But I think that's what's important is having a lot of good support around you. But yes, I couldn't do this without my husband's support. I couldn't do this without my family's support. In terms of, and maybe this is something we're getting into a little bit later, but in terms of pursuing a career or choosing things, I had to balance what I wanted because I wanted it all. I wanted the career. I wanted the family. I wanted the time with my spouse. I wanted a home. I wanted a community. And so I had to balance that and make the sacrifices where I needed to do. And I think we set those examples for the people around us.
Oh, Pro Tem, you laid a number of things on the table that we have to unpack later. We have that, Sandy's looking at me because we often have that conversation about balance. And one of my favorite stories to tell is from Nomi Bergman, who's one of my mentors and sponsors, and she was the leader of the cable industry as well, the former president of Bright House Networks. She would say, throw out balance and just, because when you're most happy, you probably are in a situation where you're imbalanced because, when you're excelling at work, something's probably not getting done at home. So I would love to talk a little bit more about that and weave that in our discussion today to help, again, to set perspective. And Sandy, you are in the cable industry and a titan among leaders, especially given your technical background. Tell us about some of your challenges and how you came to your role.
Well, I think it's very interesting how we all have a common thread of family that helped us, take those risks. And I'll never forget when I was very confused. I was a senior at Penn State and I came home at Christmas and I said, what am I going to do? And my father said, go into sales because you are better at selling us on everything we need to do, but go into technical sales and learn it better than any man in that room. And it was very hard to get my first break. My first job, I couldn't get into technical sales. But after 9 months, I got into technical sales. And I did learn it better. And I was very fortunate, this industry, WICT, to build the mentors like Stephanie Mitchko-Beal, who's the CTO of Charter. She's leading all the next generation technology that the industry is going to be offering. To have somebody like Stephanie, and Nomi Bergman is another mentor and sponsor for me, who's now sitting on the board of Comcast Cable, the largest cable operator in the country. Great women that brought me along. And that also made a lot of impact on my life because I need to bring as many women along. And as Marva said, it's about getting into tech, taking the risk. I'm not an engineer. And it's so interesting. I'm in so many meetings, especially now sitting at the board level, and they look at me for the technical answers as if I am the engineer. And because I did learn it better than a lot of the guys in the room, and I continue to study, I know the answers. So definitely, take advantage of those mentors, sponsors, and in organizations like WICT to help you develop, because it is all part of the journey I've had and the wonderful friends I've made along the way.
I love, Sandy, that you remarked on that common thread about the men and our fathers and how our fathers and brothers and how they've played a role in shaping who we are. Speaker Stevens, when you mentioned your father being chauvinistic earlier, I thought my father started chauvinistic and now I think I'm his pride and joy. So I'm sure.
Well,
Sandy,
and
your comment.
my brothers would tell you that it was a disadvantage. He had very clear expectations for them to come into his family business, whereas the girls, we could do anything we wanted. We could go to law school. They couldn't go.
That's fantastic. I love how we create opportunities and whatever our circumstances are. That's a fantastic story. And Sandy, when you were speaking, you made me remember the discussion we had at the Stanford program for senior executives a couple of weeks ago, where we talked about the fact that there may not be a seat for us at the table. So we'll bring our own chairs and bring a chair, pull up a chair for someone else as well. And so that the importance of sponsorships can't be, underscored. It's one of the most common themes, I think, in all of our success. So one of the topics I wanted to talk a little bit about is that when we imagine a master negotiator, our first thought might be a strong masculine character, one who doesn't bend or succumb to pressure or give up on their point of view. And many women, in contrast, suffer through what has been termed as an imposter syndrome, particularly those women who are moving up the ladder in their careers. What would you say to those women to help them overcome any imposter syndrome insecurities? And I think I started with you, Mayor Lyles, the last time, so I'll go in reverse order I'll start with Sandy.
So it's very interesting about negotiating. I think it's something that people, for women, it can really intimidate. And again, it's where you use your network. And I've been just negotiating with a company that wanted me to come and join them full time. And I was like, I'm not sure this is quite right with everything else I have going on with all my board service. And it was really forceful, and I love the technology. I love the people, and I'm like, I'm really interested, but I have all these things I've been working on, and leading this special committee right now. Chairing it has taken up a lot of cycles, and I want to obviously join any company and under promise and over deliver. So it was a very interesting negotiation, in that I actually, at the beginning of this week, thought we were going to separate ways completely. They wouldn't see really a way for me to come on and give them all the hours I have, minus the committee work, and come on as an advisor until I could join full time. And I will share with everyone, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I'm sure all the women on this panel today are used to asking. And it was so interesting because I called one of my good friends in the industry, and she said, "You always tell me to ask. Why are you not asking for exactly what you want?" And so I did. And I thought we could be separating ways at this time. And I was really worried that we were separating ways. And to my excitement last night at about 5:30, I got an email and they said, "Well, we don't like your answer, but we'll move forward. And we want you full time and we're going to get you there, but we'll take your path." And so it's just the importance of asking and not being afraid. That's the biggest piece I could, of advice for women. What's the worst they're going to say? No. I had to realize then that my no was like no job, no partnership, nothing with this company. But it ends up, hopefully, it's going to be a great win-win for both of us. And I think that's how all negotiations, and I believe the other women on this panel will share this, when you negotiate, you can't have one winner. It's not about who wins and who loses. If you have a winner in any deal I've ever negotiated, in running large contracts with some of the largest companies in the industry, you're going to lose. It has to be a mutual win for both to walk away, because you are really building that partnership to build businesses together.
Thank you, Cindy. What a fantastic story, and congratulations.
Thank you. It was a nail biter.
So you actually highlighted a really important truth, and that is you have to be willing to take risk. You were risking security, the security of your role and your career in making the decision to stand by your goal in making sure that you were valued and you were positioned to be in a role where you could bring the value that you know you have to offer and be successful in that regard. So that's such a fantastic story. And I would love to hear Speaker Stevens, how you think women who are facing that imposter syndrome can overcome it, and maybe even an example of how you overcame it if you experienced it.
I think you're talking to me. It's sort of breaking up a little bit, but I will tell you, I came in first as a lawyer and coming into an active trial practice, doing domestic law. And I'm not just talking about children. I'm talking about divorces and alimony and discussing, the sex lives of people as we talk about alimony and things in court. I came in very much in a position of demand. I'm right. Here's my law. Here's everything. I am right. And I went about it sort of the hard way, eventually learning that, and there are classes you can take. It's so amazing. After 5 years of practice, I took mediation training, and then beyond mediation training to negotiating with difficult people. So there are ways that you can learn this procedure. And as she said, a lot of it is listening, that you can't always demand exactly what you want without knowing what the other person needs. And I frequently have to do that here in the legislature. Is you've done this bill and know it's wrong and it's a bad idea. No, that's not the approach to it. The approach is, what is it you're trying to accomplish, and how do we get there and accomplish that together? So a big part of it is listening, being able to do that. One of my favorite expressions from it's Fisher and Urey's book, Getting Past No, is don't get even, get what you want. I don't have to always be right. I don't always have to give up everything. I want to get to a certain point, and how do I get there? I can get there by listening, by learning, by negotiating. And I found that to be a very, very effective way of dealing with people.
Oh, I love that, Speaker Stevens, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, how can having a woman in a negotiation room be a superpower? And you and Sandy both just hit on two things that I believe women are uniquely positioned. I'm not saying that no man has these skills. What I'm saying is, just I think part of our nature, maybe in the culture behind how we were reared. But you both hit on two things that I think are superpowers for women being in a negotiating session. You, Speaker Stevens, spoke about listening. And Sandy, you also spoke about listening, but then you also spoke about the sentiment that you overcame, in that there had to be a winner and a loser in the negotiating process. It was not an adversarial process. It was a collaborative process to see how you could both get the most out of your the value you had to bring to that company. So I both fantastic responses. And Mayor Lyles, I would love to hear your voice here as well, because as you know, that you were taking on a monstrous role. You're the first African American female to lead the largest city in North Carolina. So I could imagine if there's something that's intimidating, that may have been an intimidating role for you.
Well, thank you. I actually think that Representative Stevens and Sandy and I have had these same kind of life experiences. When we think about the idea of everybody being a winner, I often think about the books that I've read, the classes that I've taken that said, focus on the interest instead of the position. What are you trying to do instead of what you want to get done? And that's part of the integral part of when I ran for office, my first attempt at political office, which I had to make a statement about who I was to the community to get their support. And I talked about the issue of partnerships and collaboration. And this is one of the things, it's interesting, the phrasing imposter syndrome, because what I believe is that if you're making a decision to enter a space as a leader and having that syndrome, then at some point you're not going to be very happy with yourself, because you have to be who you are. And I think thinking through who you are very early in your process, having your mentors talk with you about your strengths, having your mentors be able to give you critical feedback to say, we think that this is something you should work on. You should take a class. You should read this book, because we know these behaviors that are expected in corporate America. We know the behaviors expected of women, particularly in corporate behavior. And there are leaders that have taken this path that can help us navigate it. So my sense of this is that if you're beginning to feel like I've got to act like someone else, you need to go back, sit down and get that quiet space and say, who am I? And how do I build my strengths? One of the things that I learned very early on in politics is you run to your strength, not to your weaknesses. And being an imposter is a weakness. So you have to go back and think, what is your core strength, and develop that in a way. As Sandy said, I am developing myself into a place where I know what I want, and I'm going to ask for that. And I'm willing to take the risk, as you say, Marva. You have to be able to do that. So I believe that knowing who you are, getting support from other women leaders, knowing that the data says that you will be better if you know yourself and develop those strengths.
Lyles, I love that. Run to your strengths. I love it. And you talked about the fact that we have access to resources to help to build these skills and to build and shape our thinking. And one of the resources is this panel. So thank you, ladies. I love that piece of insight as well. I'm running to my strengths all day. I wanted to move to talk a little bit about the business case for diversity. And research indicates a correlation between workplace diversity and innovation, which is, as we all know, a key to our success in the cable and telecommunications industry. Sandy, could you speak a bit to how diverse experiences have driven the teams you've led to create innovative solutions?
Well, I have a favorite statistic right now from the Boston Consulting Group, and I'm going to read it to make sure I'm accurate in the stat. But they found that companies with above average diversity within their management teams have innovation revenue of 45% versus 26% for those with below average leadership and diversity. So knowing statistically, the research backs it. And then obviously all these years in my career, I've been such a champion of diversity and inclusion, and trying to especially bring more women into technology. When I was leading the consumer products group within Eris, now CommScope, which is here in the Carolinas, when you're developing products for retail, if you do not have a diverse team, you are not going to develop a product for the consumers that's highly adopted. So I came into that team. I was the first woman general manager in the whole company. And I went and told my boss, I said, I'm going to have the most diverse team in the entire company. And in 2 years I did. And I had it from all, from, gender, ethnicity, age, because especially developing consumer products, if it wasn't for some of the young millennials that pounded on the equipment to make sure it worked, when you would go buy that router off the shelf at Best Buy, it wasn't going to succeed. So it really proved out the statistics. And, with that team, we ended up launching one of the first Wi-Fi 6 products ever at retail. I just couldn't say enough. The diversity, it proved out, the stats are there, and I just encourage the real benefit of a diverse team.
It's fantastic, Sandy. That's a great example. And it actually ties really well to another topic I wanted us to explore, and that's the concept of companies with women in their top ranks being more profitable companies and being more productive, as you mentioned in your statistics you shared or research you shared. And they also have higher employee retention and greater overall staff morale. So at Charter, we have the privilege of having some exceptional women in all aspects of our business. You mentioned Stephanie Mitchko earlier, and I also mentioned our regional vice president, Shannon Atkinson, for the Carolinas. In fact, 20% of our executive leadership team is female. Have either of you experienced diversity or a lack of diversity in an organization that you've been involved with? And if so, how did it impact your experience? And Sandy, I loved hearing how you made it your objective to make your organization diverse. I'd love to hear Representative Stevens. I would love to hear, because you don't get to pick your workmates, right? Like they're selected by everybody else in the state. Tell us a little bit about how a diversity or lack of diversity factors into some of the things that happen at the legislature.
Well, in my private practice, of course, I control the environment. And to be honest, I've typically worked more with women than anybody. So that's been a very comforting fact. When I came to Raleigh, though, you can't find, I don't believe anywhere you would find a more diverse group than you find here. There are 120 different people, different races, different genders, different backgrounds. We have a 21-year-old bail bondsman. We have an 80-year-old who served in the Marine Corps. We have funeral home directors. We have attorneys. We have realtors. We have people who consider themselves housewives, but then you find out the diversity of experience they've experienced there. It is an incredibly diverse as you are moving it along. How will it impact this group versus that group? How will it help them, or how might it hurt them? And we have to take those factors in consideration, make adjustments and tweaks. And that's a lot of why we do a lot of our work through committee. A lot of what you see on the floor is after it's already been through those washing discussions in the committees where there's, again, this group of diverse people. It's incredible to have that kind of diversity.
I love that you reminded me that our legislative leaders do so on a part-time basis because you're actually fully engaged.
Yes.
Yeah, the full-time job that is actually only noted as part-time in context. Great example.
And that's been hard to hold down another job outside of that. Imagine trying to hold down a law practice while you're doing this part-time job. And it's not only part-time that I'm here and part-time that I'm in the law office, and Mayor Lyles hopefully can comment on this. our job doesn't end Monday through Friday. People want you to come at night and speak. They want you to visit with this group. They want to have you have the discussion here. You need to go to this dinner and present an award or talk to the community. It is very much a community service.
Mayor Lyles, to Speaker Stevens' point, I'd love to hear your perspective, because Charlotte is an incredibly diverse city, I think, in my experience there, and you've had a unique opportunity as the first female African-American leader for the city. So I'd love to hear, again, a little bit of your perspective and your response to Speaker Stevens' question.
Well, I love Sandy's comments about a diverse team. I also understand deeply Representative Stevens' collection of her board, which numbers over 100 people that you have to engage and have participating with you. But in my philosophy is in government, when you are represented, we have a representative democracy here, and we're really compelled to represent those that we serve. And we have to recognize that there are major differences in many of the groups that we have living in our city. We are at a particularly, I think, important moment in our city's history, because we're both trying to be not just a city, but we're trying to be a county that's inclusive and a region that's inclusive. That's just one dimension of it. But we also have to remember how many women are in our that live in our city. What are the demographics of women? How many of them have jobs that pay a wage that allows them to live here? My goal in Charlotte is that people of all walks of life have the opportunity to have a job so that they can afford to live in our city and also have the quality of life that they choose. So you don't have to, I don't want a city that's can be pegged so much as they are corporate, and that's all they are. Because corporate is only successful when you have someone that's at the entry door, that's doing the data entry, that's assisting customer service. And we've got to build a city that allows for women to be successful. So to me, the idea of diversity has many, many metrics. But as a mayor of Charlotte, I have to pay attention to all of them. I have to pay attention to where people are strong and where we need to make them stronger. But to have the goal for people to be able to live in a representative democracy and the lifestyle and the quality of life that they choose to have is very important to being diverse and inclusive and being the kind of city that's going to be successful, I believe, in the next generation.
Thank you, Mayor Lyles. If you don't mind, I wanted to segue and have you respond to the next question, because I think your perspective has kind of taken us to this new next issue, and that's that nationally, 83% of women, or 83% of all consumer purchases are controlled globally by women. So that's a $20 trillion control factor that we as women have in our powers. How do statistics like this influence your perspective on decision making and how important it is to have diversity of perspective as you plan and engage your citizenry?
This is just a small example. When I was on the city council, we made some changes in our insurance policies, our healthcare insurance policies. Now we have a large workforce in our fire, police, and solid waste. Those are the largest parts of our workforce. But we thought about, if we're making these changes, who do we need to inform? So it would be great to hand the majority male workforce that information, but we knew that that wasn't going to help make the system work better. So we actually asked them to bring in the person that made those decisions in their household. And those decisions were made by the women in their families. And we had them come in. So you have to begin to think about things very differently. Who's going to make that decision, and how do you engage them in the decision-making process and implementation of things? It's just like the diversity, as Sandy has said, of the team. The diversity of the marketplace is great. It's growing even more diverse. We have a large immigrant population here. And most people, when they think about our immigrant population, they think Latino. But our Asian Indian population is huge. So we had an immigrant task force after some of the incidents that were occurring around the country. And as we went out, I learned more about diversity and growth and growing wealth and growing careers, growing families, growing this population as I could have ever imagined. But you have to go out and talk to the people that are in charge of it. So my sense of this is that know where the decisions are being made and go to those folks and engage them in the process and the decision making. That's what makes a difference.
Fantastic. And I wanted to talk a little bit, about something that is a sensitive topic. Everybody can tell you I like generally to talk about sunshine, but this is not a bit of sunshine. This is a little bit of concern, and that the most recent status on women in the state study gave North Carolina a C letter grade for women's employment and earnings, finding that North Carolina ranks in the bottom third of the nation, 36th for workforce participation. Considering your own career path to leadership, considering your perspective on what's going to make the economy flourish in North Carolina, what's going to give people the highest quality of life, which is what I know you want as a citizen and what you want as a leader for the people who you are leading. What do you think are some of the impediments to North Carolina getting better than a C as it relates to women in their engagement in the employment process and earnings? And what are some of the factors that you've seen that have limited or may have been limiting in your own careers that you had to overcome?
Is that from?
You could start, and then I'll go. I would love for everyone to share that, because this will probably be our last question, unless everybody wants to give me more time.
Well, the gender pay gap, a study just released yesterday, narrowed overall by 6% in 3 years, with women ages 25 to 30 seeing the most improvement at that time. But one of the things that I've seen is COVID has really impacted us. Our unemployment has risen for women more than any other category. And it's perhaps because of the hospitality industry, but more importantly, I think it has to do with social constraints that we have. And so when we want to really actually begin to think about how we can give women equal footing, besides having the ability to have a great education and training for a great job, we have to look and understand that in our world, that women, especially single women with children, have particularly difficult times finding adequate daycare. Now, you can find daycare, but having the kind of daycare that we would choose to have our children participate in is a very different story across our city, our footprint. But I would say that the healthcare and daycare for single women with children would be an immediate impact upon how women could compete for the opportunity in our economic environment.
That's a fantastic point, and I love that you brought in specifically the situation as it related to COVID and how that exacerbated what was already an underlying challenge for women in the workforce. And I would love to hear Speaker Stevens. I know that we've made some strides in the legislative process in terms of representation with women. I think we're at nationwide 30% of our state legislatures. Nationwide, we have women in about 30% of the elected positions across our state legislatures. In North Carolina is about 26%. So your perspective in this context as a lawyer and as a legislator, I'd love to hear some of the challenges you think that are impeding further engagement there.
Sure, sure. And the statistics that show the economic disparity, does that include all women? I mean, I'd love to dig deeper into the data because sometimes you have data that maybe doesn't give a full representation of what's there. I know that there are lots of women who make the choice to not work or to only work part-time. My hourly rate as an attorney was the same as all the other attorneys in the community. But I might not make as much money as them because I might want to take off an hour during the day to go visit my children at school or participate in a program. I would want to leave at 5 o'clock every day to go home and spend time with my kids and my family. Daycare is an issue, but if I wound up in court and court ran late, I had to make sure that I had someone who could pick up my children at daycare. And I think a lot of that are decisions that we make as we choose a job, as we decide what we want to do in a profession. Single women who have children, that's a situation I just almost can't deal with. But we go back with the consumer portion of this. Every 2 years, we have to run for office. So I serve a year, run a year, serve a year, run a year. And when you talk about that, you reach out to who is your population. And one of the big target populations has been women. So what are women needing? How do we get women to run? Because they are a big portion of our voting population. We need to see what kind of needs they have. We need to continue to talk. We need to continue to be there. Now, how do we resolve some of these issues? I would think supply and demand. If you're needing daycare, I would think that the cost of daycare may be going up, but you could get good qualified providers that way. Because I always use daycare and I was very critical of what kind of daycare I wanted, what I did want and need from there. And luckily I found a very good daycare center that I could look out the back door and watch the kids when they were out playing from my law office. Those are very, very real issues that need to be addressed and that we have to address in some way. But that also has to do with family support. Being an area where you have family, where you have a supportive husband. At some point we talk about us as women, but I think as an attorney, and I think probably being on a board or even being a mayor, at some point you don't want to be thought of as a woman. You want to be thought of as that professional in the room. You are just like the man that's sitting there. And that's part of we as women have to say, okay, men, you are also a parent. You are also a father. You can pick up some of this slack and you can do some of the things that need to be done. As I said, I couldn't have run for the General Assembly if it hadn't been for my husband. I couldn't have run if my children weren't being supportive of it. My kids were still in high school when I first ran, and that was a big struggle. That was very hard for me to be down here because I think as women, we tend to be the nurturers. We want to be the person who's there. And by wanting to be the person that's there, we wind up making sacrifices. And a lot of times those sacrifices are hours and wages.
Oh, we could spend another 30 minutes just talking about exactly the point you highlighted, Speaker Stevens. The difference between really equality and equity and how you choose to allocate resources and the choices we make and how that all plays itself out. You gave fantastic examples. Thank you. And Sandy, I would love to hear your perspective as well on what you see as some of the challenges to help in North Carolina, especially close that gap.
Well, for me personally, when I started in my career, I started in sales. And just like the representative just said, she was billing the same hours. When you're selling, you're getting paid on commission. So if you are doing a good job, you get paid. So that was a really good spot for me. As I rose through the ranks and ended up I ended up as one of the first women in one of the most senior levels in the company. I was the first woman. I remember going, I know I am not getting paid equally to what the 7 other guys sitting around the table are making. And I actually went to my boss and I used a selling technique of getting him to say yes, yes, yes. And I started questioning him and I said, I know I'm the lowest paid person in this role in this public company. And he said yes. And then he looked like the monkey that, speak no evil. And he went, oh no. I said yes. And he admitted the truth. And I said, listen, let's work to fix it together. I knew they couldn't fix it in 1 year, but we put a plan together, and to his word, again, if you don't ask, you don't get, he made good on that. What I'm thrilled now to be in a position serving on the board. I actually happen to be part of the compensation committee. So I am looking at, from the board, from a role of diversity, to the leadership team, to the succession planning, and also looking at all that compensation and making sure that the women in the company and the diverse members are getting compensated fairly. So I'm so thrilled now to be in a position to help influence that and achieve it. And that's one of those things, as we all rise through the ranks in our careers, we need to, just including and having people at the table is good. They got to get paid equal. And that's on us as we become leaders. So that's one of the most exciting thing for me now, is I am in a position even more to influence that from the board level and continue to bring more women along and help get that gap narrowed.
Ladies, I want to thank each of you. This has been a fabulous conversation, and I've learned a lot from each of you. We'll have to schedule a whole afternoon tea and roundtable discussion at some point. I could hear your perspectives for much more time than we have today. And so thank you again for joining Charter Communications and WICT-Carolinas to share your unique perspectives and your journeys. As we celebrate Women's History Month, it is an honor to acknowledge your collective experiences and accomplishments as leaders. And before the panel closes, I'd like to also extend a heartfelt thank you to all of the WICT-Carolinas members. Thank you for joining us from your homes and your offices. I'm honored. And now I'd like to turn it over to the WICT-Carolinas Executive Programming Lead, Jen Tracy, and she'll offer a more extended conversation on leadership, empowering women and leading with more.